maybe specifically then, and Michael Krywucki will sort of lean on you for this answer. So part of this shelter in place, there was some discussion around Dallas dealing with the proposal to send 60-day pre-eviction notices to commercial and residential tenants. So from a TREC perspective, tell us a little about sort of that process and what we did and how we arrived at a decision to provide some response to the city on what they were contemplating.
Thank you, Kristian. Well, first of all, without saying, it's a difficult situation for all involved. And as a part of this, we appreciate the compassion shown by city leaders, governmental agencies, as well as the community in ensuring that residents, tenants, commercial and residential, as well as landlords, are all dealing with impacts from this crisis, and that to the extent there is a way to provide relief and minimize displacement, that could potentially help the greater community overall. And so the initial concept that was proposed was the city leaders wanted to provide a safety net to help all residents and family businesses and families from losing their rental homes, apartments, and places of business. And as a result, an ordinance was initially drafted because you have to start somewhere. And that was provided for initial guidance and input. And its main focus was to provide a big safety net for those who, in fact, had incurred some economic hardship and may not be able to pay their rent at all, or only partial payments, and to go ahead and contribute to the homelessness or displacement of businesses even further, was viewed as a challenge. So, TREC saw this and recognized that one of our goals, obviously, is to help and support the community. We have a variety of stakeholders within TREC, and that was really our focus all along, to make sure that the rights and interests of all stakeholders participating in the process or affected by this crisis would receive appropriate protection and consideration. And one of the things that jumped out to us is, while we appreciate the heart being in the right place to protect families and family businesses, many of these families also had family businesses which consisted of rental homes or smaller shopping centers or restaurant sites. And all of those would have been impacted as well if the original ordinance as proposed would have gone through. So we also appreciated that, fortunately, the federal and state governments were not sitting on the sidelines, and they had taken some initiatives to provide some relief against evictions and writs of possession being issued to displaced parties. So, and we also believe that in a time of crisis, you'd like to bet on the human spirit as being compassionate as well. And we also believe that many landlords, whether commercial or residential, would extend some compassion and be cooperative and reasonable to their tenants who are having financial troubles during this time, because everyone knows it's very expensive to displace a tenant and then replace them with a tenant, regardless of whether it's residential or commercial. And so there is a motivation to cooperate anyway. As a result, the proposed ordinance went through several iterations, and we commend the City Council for creating the ad hoc committee. We also appreciate their great efforts to provide us with an opportunity and a seat at the table to contribute. And, through the efforts of my colleagues here on this panel, as well as the others who participated in this process, led by Bryan, we were able to go ahead and review and provide input to some of the proposed ordinances and make recommendations. Seeing where the state of Texas has already had an eviction moratorium until May 18th, which is still in effect. Dallas County actually has a moratorium on evictions through June 6th currently. So again, appreciating those are in place. We wanted to make sure that the ultimate ordinance, in fact, was tailored. And we're pleased that in fact the final product did achieve that. First and foremost, it was limited to residential tenancies only. Secondly, there was some clarification made to truly identify those being economically affected by COVID and not being overly broad and inclusive, because most of the landlords are still going to have mortgage obligations as well as carrying costs for the operations of the property. And so we were pleased to see that those narrowed. We also greatly appreciated the fact that this gave an opportunity for the creation of the tenant assistance program for payments. Not only does that offer some relief, this is in the final ordinance that was passed, not only does that offer some relief to the tenants who can, in fact, potentially qualify and begin making payments in full or significant part, but also that would then allow the residential landlords who are under the moratorium on evictions to receive some revenue. So that was an incredibly great feature. The benefit of providing a mechanism for the parties to negotiate has a lot of function to it, and we appreciate and supported that. And the final outcome of this ordinance makes the whole process a lot more predictable. And we see this as a positive evolution of a concept that was well intentioned to something that, at the end of the day, should provide some relief, but also not go further and cause unintended consequences.
That's a great summary.
Yeah, I was just going to add, and Mike covered it in his kind of last comment, the heart and the spirit of the notion is unquestionable. The original draft, which was never intended to be the final draft, but the commencement of the conversation, had a litany of unintended consequences, not just for landlords or tenants, but also on the city, because in our mind, it also tiptoed on whether it violated some other larger overriding entities like a state law. And so it was really helping tailor it down so that you got the vast majority of the good and you took out the unintended consequences. And under Bryan's leadership, I think that was tailored significantly. And I think that Bryan and Krywucki and the other group that were working on it really helped the city, the whole city, by having this done. So it was kind of enjoyable to watch a very positive result for the entire community out of the effort.
And to add to what Mike said, first of all, thank you. And it was clearly a team effort. We were pleased by the input of many stakeholders in the community and members company-wide at the company level as well as individual level within TREC who supported. And that really helped make this become a reality and actually achieve the goals without overstepping. And as Mike noted, there were significant questions as to the constitutionality of some of the earlier iterations of the ordinance and whether or not there would be conflict between state and federal law as well. And it's also important that there was a recognized exception for criminal activity and also domestic violence, which, of course, an unintended consequence would have been, in fact, to allow residents to remain who were promoting conduct along those lines, and they'd have the safe harbor. So it was truly a team effort. So we were pleased by the evolution result.